Hey there, this is the Kingdom of Pinfall, a fantasy alternate universe wrestling fan fiction podcast. I'm Michelle, and we're on Chapter 12 of this War and Peace length catastrophe. Check the episode description for pertinent links. I'm not going to talk very much at all, because I'm going to be recording a bunch of chapters in a row, back to back, to go ahead and get them scheduled, because I've got shit to do. This chapter contains me doing accents again, so heads up, ears may bleed. It's Becky and Nikki, so they will probably end up sounding Australian. I'm gonna butcher this whole thing. Enjoy! Let's go! Chapter 12, BlissCross Journey to the Forgotten Lands of Nitro, Part 2. The white marble towers of the city appear on the horizon toward the end of the second day of Alexa and Nikki's trek. This region of the Realm of Ra is not quite a desert, but is dry and mostly flat. The Hall of Fame looks like a pearlescent protrusion, jutting up from the expanse of brown like a row of jagged teeth. Alexa, fluttering ahead using her hand as a visor to look toward the city, asks her traveling companions, "Do we want to get what we need and keep moving?" "No one's come after Becky's belts," Nikki observes with some curiosity. She says it sort of optimistically, like she thinks it might be safe for them to stop for more than provisions. They've been walking openly down the main road leading to the Hall of Fame for a while. Becky perks up, hearing her name. She's walking behind the other two and says, "I've beaten everyone already, is why." "Some people more than once. Most people don't like getting their asses kicked over and over. Except Charlotte. Charlotte seems like she's into it, but most people aren't." "You've never beaten Asuka," Nikki reminds her, grinning. "I'll beat her too if she gets brave enough to show up and challenge me," the redhead responds dispassionately. "I'm the best. Alexa cuts her off before she can begin listing the various titles she's given herself. Almost everyone is hiding their belts and trying not to lose them because things are weird right now. Becky is wearing both belts of power. The SmackDown belt is around her waist, and the Raw belt is above it, around her chest. It doesn't look comfortable, but Becky doesn't seem to care and insists upon doing it, even though she has to walk with her elbows sticking out a bit. Her hand has completely healed, and she cleaned up a little when they ran into a creek before entering the plains. She still looks mildly disheveled, but it didn't deter anyone they met on the road from greeting her with enthusiasm. The commoners barely notice Alexa and Nikki. They stand in the background watching the peasants grab at Becky. Constantly having to stop so people could bask in the presence of the champ slowed them a lot. "Cowards," Becky says with a yawn. "I say we rest. Start fresh tomorrow. The world won't end just yet, and the Hall of Fame is the last sanctuary this far north. No challenges allowed in those pretty walls." Alexa turns and looks at her, flying a few feet off the ground next to Nikki. "I don't know if the sanctuary rule applies when a WrestleMania is—" "Bah! WrestleMania!" Becky waves her hand. "If the monks and scholars have been infiltrated by the forces of evil, I'll protect you. No need to fret your little heads over it. You're traveling with the greatest." "How do you not believe in the WrestleManias?" Nikki asks her, cutting off her list of titles, and asking the question that has been gnawing at her since Becky joined them. She sounds angry about it, offended. "I don't not believe in them," she groans, then tells her, "It's complicated." The redhead cringes slightly and begins dragging her feet. "I just don't think it's something we need to be deeply concerned about. They're gonna keep happening over and over. The forces of evil will keep resurfacing, and the champions will emerge and defeat them. It's an endless cycle." "You don't know that," Nikki argues. She turns completely around and stops, coming face to face with Becky. Her teeth are bared, and she looks ready to fight, fists clenched at her sides. Becky looks Nikki over and groans again. "It's how it's been since the beginning of time. The forces of evil will never be completely defeated, but they'll never win. They just crawl back under their rocks when it's done. They crawl back out when Pinfall needs a little reminder that they exist. The WrestleManias remind us who the heroes are, but everyone forgets again eventually, and on it goes." She says again, "It's an endless cycle." Wow, that was a very motivational speech, Becky, Alexa says sarcastically and grabs onto Nikki's arm, making her back up out of Becky's face. I'm just saying that it matters, but doesn't really matter in the grander scheme of things. It's been hundreds of years since the last WrestleMania. Nikki reaches out and prods at Becky's belts while Alexa struggles to keep her at bay, grabbing onto both of her arms. The forces of evil have gotten stronger. They're doing it different. This WrestleMania is different, Nikki growls. Becky puts up her hands in surrender. Okay, I'm not one to totally squash someone's hopes and dreams unless the hopes and dreams are winning me belts. So, okay. I hope we don't run into any D-monks in the Hall of Fame. Alexa and Nikki both look at her blankly, and she says, Demon monks, D-monks, monks that have joined the bad guys. Get it? Nikki calms down somewhat, letting out a noisy sigh. Becky has disappointed her. Alexa knows this because she's holding onto her elbow still. The tension fades and they continue quietly for a while, with Alexa periodically flitting into the air to make sure no one is coming to attack them. Becky breaks the silence, saying, I can't believe you didn't laugh at my D-monks joke. It was funny. It was sort of funny. Nikki agrees reluctantly. The Irish woman plows forward and shoulders her way between Alexa and Nikki, throwing an arm across each of their shoulders. Cheer up, pals, she tells them, forcing Alexa down to the ground. Assuming WrestleMania is upon us, we're gonna win. You've got me and I'm the... Please do not. Alexa yet again cuts her off before she can start her list. Becky pouts and says instead, I'll help you get your belts back from those anime characters when they show up, yeah? Hopefully they don't show up before we get to the Hall of Fame, because as you can tell, I am without a weapon. Not that I can't punch their faces in with my fists, but you know, weapons are nice. I like having a pole arm myself. How about the two of you? I know a good shopkeeper up here. He'll cut you a deal. I need crossbow bolts, Alexa says, and pats the crossbow hanging from her hip. Throwing knives too. And vitamins. Ah, Becky says in a jolly voice. Vitamins, huh? Nikki chimes in, fist weapons. Becky looks at her and asks, so you're really into punching people then, or more of a claw type? She's being exceptionally friendly, an attempt to make up for her dour WrestleMania beliefs. When the road transforms to well-kept sandstone bricks, Becky releases her grip on them and walks out in front. The city looks warm and welcoming as the sun sets, but it's still a good walk away. Their walk has been strangely uneventful. Becky realizes that her travels have all been uneventful following her very odd encounter with Liv Morgan. The Chosen One, she called her, and then said, He says it isn't time for you to fail yet. Whenever it got too quiet, these words would start echoing in her head, bouncing off of the inside of her skull, getting louder and louder. She wonders if Liv was one of the forces of evil, or if she was in league with someone else. Who was he? She puts a stop to the echoing, taking off the raw women's belt of power so she can walk normally. She chucks it over her left shoulder and says to Alexa and Nikki, So you two want to be heroes, huh? Great champions like in the stories. Made into gods by the Titan of Pinfall. Nikki blurts out so quickly that it's barely comprehensible, We just want to save Pinfall from the destruction. Becky turns and says, Aha! She points at her. But what you fail to realize is that we, the champions, are much more destructive than the forces of evil between the good old WrestleManias. Oh, are you about to give another motivational speech? Alexa rolls her eyes. I'm merely speaking truths, the grim truths of Pinfall, she says, very dour again. What's true is that Raw sucks the joy out of everyone after a while, doesn't it? Alexa laughs a little and elbows Nikki so that she joins in on her joke. Aye, Nikki says quietly. I remember Becky being a lot more fun. Becky can still hear them both, as neither is making an actual attempt to whisper. She knows that now they're just making fun of her. She smirks a little. As she turns back around, she says to them matter-of-factly, I've got to make sure I'm on the right side with all these sides to choose from. I mean, there's the Messiah, the King of the Ring, Charlotte and her delusions of grandeur. Nikki clears her throat nervously as Becky mentions Charlotte, and Alexa subtly pinches her arm. Becky turns just enough to spot the motion out of the corner of her eye. She chuckles to herself as she turns toward the front again. The Queen hasn't made an appearance during their travels either. She wonders why these two keep their dealings with her a secret. They think it best, she figures. Charlotte also likely told them to, because she also thinks it best. The truth will eventually be revealed. It always is. Becky speaks up again. Whose idea was it to get the ancient contracts, anyway? Xavier Woods, Alexa answers her. Ah, the New Day. She's pleased. You know, after the ancient contracts were sealed away in the magic briefcases and hidden in Nitro, no one ever went after them again. None of the champions seem to have even thought to go get them during any of the subsequent WrestleManias. This is a fun fact from the WrestleMania archives of Charlotte Flair, by the way. So I guess that does make this WrestleMania a little different. Nikki grins. See, I told ya. Do either of you have any idea how to get the contracts where they are? Becky is quizzing them, seeing if they pass this arbitrary test of hers. They're in a tower, Nikki answers this time. Becky turns and gives her a mischievous smile, her face cast in elongated shadows by the fading sunlight, making her look like she's about to tell a ghost story around a campfire. There are several towers. The contracts are in the tallest one, the aptly, albeit verbosely named, Tower of the Night of Champions. It was the last tower to fall in the Monday Night Wars. Nitro once warred with the realm of Raw, you know. Raw won and wiped Nitro from the map. Not as forces of evil. Us. The walls of Jericho were built, and many of the heroes from the lands of Nitro and Thunder became champions in the first WrestleMania. The belts were forged, and all of the contracts were hidden away in that tower, protected by old magic. Why? Nikki asks her excitedly, enjoying the story very much. Why were the contracts hidden and protected by magic? Becky asks, amused by Nikki's genuine fascination. Because the Titan of Pinfall didn't want us to know too much. Secrets are important for control, just like the endless cycle of WrestleManias. Whoa, Nikki mutters, eyes wide. Is that true? She shrugs and turns away from them again. We'll see once we get him, won't we? Music begins to play, emanating from the space around them, and the Becky chants begin, getting louder and louder as they reach the city, and more people join in. The center of the Hall of Fame is a huge monastery, flanked by a huge library and a museum. The open-air market is through the main gate where the trio enters. Branching off from the market are all of the established shops, the taverns, the inns. They are greeted by Samoa Joe in addition to Becky's ceaseless fanfare. Becky wanders toward the heart of the market, and Joe looks toward Alexa and Nikki welcomingly. He is bedecked in plain red robes and has a white towel draped over his shoulders. He says, Alexa Bliss, it has been a while since you visited the realm of Raw. What brings you here? Passing through, she answers with a slightly mistrustful smile, unsure if he's a friend or a demunk. He lowers his voice and looks her straight in the eyes. WrestleMania? She nods and he motions for her to follow him away from the crowded street. More and more people seem to be emerging from nowhere to flock toward Becky. He says to them, This way. You believe it's coming? Nikki asks him, whispering and also following because she doesn't trust Samoa Joe. We knew it was coming before we received word from Charlotte Flair, he tells her as they pass down a dark alley. He struggles to squeeze between a wall and a dumpster that the two women follow him through with ease, Alexa flying gracefully over it. He adjusts his robes and adds, There were signs. Why didn't you respond to her? Alexa asks him, bothered by this more than she's bothered that they are following him somewhere for an unknown reason. We will send word when the time comes. Our priority is protecting the Hall of Fame, he says. The entire history of pinfall is here, except... He pauses and looks at them. He looks especially at Nikki. The ancient contracts. Where are you taking us? Nikki asks him, sounding more worried and feeling unnerved by his last comment and his piercing gaze directed blatantly at her. A shortcut to the monastery is all, Nikki Cross. He answers politely enough and tucks his hands into his sleeves. We've been expecting you. We expected you much sooner, in fact. Bringing Becky Lynch with you was unexpected. Yeah, well, Becky. Alexa tells him with annoyance, directed mostly at Becky. How did you know we were coming? I have eyes and ears throughout the realms, he answers casually as he leads them up the steps to the monastery's entrance. The simple but tall wooden doors open for them, and the foyer is lined with silver braziers filled with coals that house faint flames. It casts the entryway in eerie shadow, especially with dusk falling outside. Tending the braziers is Nia Jax. She looks at them as they pass, but says nothing. Once they enter another corridor, Alexa speaks again to Joe, landing next to him with her wings vanishing. So I've, acquired a crossbow that I was going to ask about in the museum because it sort of looks like, well... She doesn't finish what she's saying and instead holds it out toward him. He slowly raises his eyebrows, but his expression remains solemn and pleasant. Doesn't it look like... Yes. He reaches for it and then pulls his hand away before his fingers come into contact with it. He again tucks his hands into his sleeves. He looks at the weapon quietly for a time. Where did you find it? Liv Morgan had it, Alexa answers, and Nikki looks from her to Joe, studying them both carefully. Alexa trusts Joe for the most part. Liv Morgan? He repeats, his voice higher and full of surprise. That is a legendary crossbow. The Hulkamaniac. It was lost through a heel gate by Hulk Hogan. We believed it to be gone forever, but it seems it is not. Joe stares at it for several seconds after he finishes speaking, then he quickly turns and continues his walk down the corridor, saying nothing more about it. He leads them into a small private library, one of the many libraries of the monastery. The tomes in the libraries of the monastery are not available to the plebeian masses like those of the public library of the Hall of Fame. The shelves of books stretch from floor to ceiling, and rectangular tables are arranged in rows on either side of the room. Samoa Joe takes them to a table at the farthest side where there's a stack of books, several scrolls, and a family-sized bag of potato chips. "Why'd you bring us here?" Nikki questions loudly. She cowers when her voice echoes in the huge, empty room. Joe glowers at her, and she winces as apologetically as she can manage. "I've brought you here to give you a gift to help you on your journey, of course." He looks at her sternly before returning to the desk. He speaks while looking down and moving several scrolls aside. "I also want you to tell the Queen that we have always and will always protect Pinfall. Will you do that, Alexa Bliss?" Alexa nods. "Yeah, I guess so, brother." Joe looks up slowly and his eyes narrow. He watches her for a moment and then says, "How long has that crossbow been in your possession?" "A day," she answers. "More or less." He looks back down at the mess on the desk. He sighs. "The Hulkamaniac hasn't been seen in thousands of years. Not even I know what powers it imbues upon the one that wields it." "I guess we'll find out," Nikki tells him enthusiastically. "Yes, well," he clears his throat, barely understanding her. "I have been researching and attempting to locate other legendary artifacts, and I believe one of them is with the ancient contracts, if you care to look for it while you're there." He hands a scroll to Alexa. He then looks at Nikki expressionlessly. He doesn't seem fond of her, but not overtly disdainful. He passes her the bag of potato chips and turns his back to both of them. He clasps his hands behind him and says, "You may go now. Becky Lynch is likely causing a stir in the marketplace, and we would appreciate it if you gathered her and put her out of sight for the evening." "Thank you, brother," Alexa says sincerely. On their way out, they pass by Nia again. This time she's sweeping. She stops, looks at them, and then goes back to sweeping once they've passed. Neither of them speaks until they're on the steps of the monastery, and Nikki is the first. She holds tightly onto the peace offering Joe gave her and asks, "Why did you keep calling him brother?" "Huh?" Alexa carefully tucks the scroll into her pack and says, "Let's go find Becky, get weapons, and a place to sleep." Before they reach the crowded and colorfully illuminated market, they're intercepted by 3 figures in long hooded robes. The shorter of the 3, who is standing in the front, whispers, "Hey, Alexa, it's me, AJ." She responds. "Styles," he clarifies. "AJ Styles. These goons behind me are Anderson and Gallows, if you couldn't tell." He hitches his thumb over his shoulder. "What's going on?" Nikki is perplexed and frustrated by the frequent interruptions, and all of these men that keep wanting to block their path and say things and lead them places. No, I know who you are. What do you want? Alexa asks them. To warn you, he whispers very quietly. Don't trust those monks. Okay, cool. She pats him on the shoulder and then walks past them, followed by Nikki, who shoves the bag of potato chips into his hands as she passes. Nikki looks back several times and sees them still milling around in the street. They apparently can't decide where they want to go for dinner from what she can tell as their voices fade away. A moment later, they find Becky carrying an armful of no less than 17 different pole arms. She greets them, struggling to look around the bundle. She says excitedly, Look, weapons! I haven't picked one out yet. And thank you very much. Tune in next week for Chapter 13, which is titled Daddy's Home, which means it's an NXT chapter, and we all love those. NXT is a very dark and dreary place. Thank you for listening to this chapter. How did Samoa Joe know they were looking for the ancient contracts, and why didn't Alexa and Nikki seem to care or notice this? Dun dun dun! Thanks again for listening, and tune in next week if you want. Okay, thanks, bye!